an unidentified serial killer who operated in Northern California and left behind ciphers that still haunt the world. The letters, the symbols, the codes no one could understand. There was a moment in Northern California when fear didn't just live in the shadows, it arrived in envelopes, typed, handwritten, marked with a symbol no one had ever seen before. A circle, crossed through like the sight on a gun. A signature the world would come to know as the Zodiac. A killer who watched from a distance as police struggled, as newspapers trembled, and as everyday people stared at ciphers that felt like messages from another mind. Tonight, we reopen the case the Zodiac wanted us to solve, but couldn't. In the late 1960s, Northern California was alive with change, music, freedom, a new generation shaping a new era. But beneath that hope was a darkness no one expected. A man, whose identity remains unknown to this day, began a series of attacks that would terrorize the region. He struck without pattern, without warning, and then he spoke. Not through confessions, not through remorse, but through letters, mailed to newspapers demanding their attention and the world's fear. He called himself the Zodiac, a name he chose, a persona he built. What made him different was not only the violence of the crimes, but the theater around them. He taunted police. He threatened school buses. He turned communication into a stage, and the public became his audience. But above everything else, it was the ciphers, the puzzles, the symbols that transformed this case from a series of murders into one of the most baffling mysteries in American history. In 1969, he sent the first cipher, the 408, a message split among 3 newspapers. It was solved by a school teacher and his wife, but it revealed nothing about his identity. Only his desire for attention, his fixation on killing, and his belief in earning slaves for the afterlife, words documented directly from the solved cipher. Then came the 340 cipher, sent in November 1969, a puzzle that would remain unsolved for more than 50 years until experts and codebreakers finally cracked it in 2020. Even then, the Zodiac refused to reveal his name. He mocked. He boasted. He hid in plain sight. Tonight, we'll break down what's known, what remains a mystery, and why these ciphers still pull in investigators, cryptographers, and curious minds from around the world. The murders, the letters, the suspects, and the breakthroughs that brought us closer, but never close enough. Because the truth is simple. A half-century later, the Zodiac Killer still walks the line between fact, fear, and unsolved legend. Thousands of people will hear this story, but only a few will support the creator telling it. If you're still watching, don't be part of the silent majority. Hit subscribe so the story doesn't disappear in the algorithm. The first attacks. Lake Herman Road, December 20th, 1968. It was the night of December 20th, 1968. 2 teenagers, 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and 17-year-old David Arthur Faraday, left the familiarity of home and high school. What should have been an innocent first date turned into the opening chapter of a nightmare. They drove out to a secluded gravel turnout on a rural road east of Vallejo, California, a sparsely lit stretch known locally as Lake Herman Road, a lover's lane that offered privacy to young couples. They arrived at approximately 10:15 p.m., but that night, peace was an illusion. Sometime between 11:10 and 11:15 p.m., they were attacked. According to official reports, David Faraday was found inside the car, shot once in the head at close range. He did not survive. Betty Lou Jensing had managed to exit the vehicle. She tried to run, but the killer fired again. She was shot 5 times in the back and died at the scene. When law enforcement arrived, they found the victim's mother's Rambler station wagon parked near the entrance to what was once a pumping station. The body of Betty Lou lay roughly 10 feet behind the rear of the car. Tallying the damage, investigators recovered 10 empty .22 caliber shell casings at the scene, evidence the killer fired repeatedly. There was no robbery, no signs of struggle beyond the gunfire, nothing. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no motive. Just blood, 2 dead teenagers, and a crime scene as cold and empty as the desert night. No cameras captured the man who walked up that night. No eyewitness heard footsteps. At the scene, police found nothing pointing to identity. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no confession. It was as if the darkness itself had fired the bullets. The only certainty, 2 lives ended, 2 grieving families, and a question that would soon haunt the Bay Area. Who kills teenagers on a dark country road, and why? And more chilling, was this the first killing or simply the first to be discovered? What kind of mind turns love, innocence, and quiet nights into violence and death? That night, the first 2 pieces of a dark puzzle were placed. But the picture was far from clear. No motive, no suspect, only a question hanging still in the cold air of Lake Herman Road. And for investigators, and for everyone who would later hear his name, it would become the beginning of something far worse, something relentless, something that would come to be known as the reign of the Zodiac Killer. Blue Rock Springs shooting, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau, July 4-5, 1969. It was just after midnight on the night of July 4, 1969, Independence Day, a night of fireworks far removed from the terror that awaited. 2 young people, 22-year-old Darlene Elizabeth Ferrin and 19-year-old Michael Renaud Mageau, drove into the empty parking lot of a quiet park on the edge of Vallejo, California, Blue Rock Springs Park, a place locals knew as a lover's lane. They sought a private moment, just the 2 of them, away from the bustle of holiday crowds. But something darker was waiting. A car pulled into the lot shortly after their arrival, then drove off. A few tense minutes passed, then silence, until the car returned. The engine idled, headlights off, and a man emerged. He approached their car, with a flashlight in one hand, a 9mm handgun in the other. Michael later said they initially thought this might be a police officer. He reached for his wallet thinking to show ID, but before either of them had time to comprehend what was happening, the man opened fire. Bullets tore through the quiet night, multiple shots into the car. Darlene, gripping the steering wheel, was hit first. Then Michael, struck as he tried to duck, to escape. The shooter walked away as if done, but moments later, hearing groans from the wounded, he returned. 2 more shots. Then he vanished into the darkness. When police arrived, they found Darlene motionless behind the wheel. Michael lay wounded on the ground near the car. Darlene Ferrin was rushed to hospital, but she would not survive, pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Michael Mageau, by some cruel twist of fate, survived. He would become the first direct witness, the first living person to describe the man who would come to haunt the Bay Area. He told detectives the attacker was a white male about 5'8" in height, heavy-set but not obese, short curly hair, no glasses, a large face. This attack changed everything, because just 40 minutes later, at 12:40 a.m. on July 5, 1969, the phone rang at the Vallejo Police Department. The voice was calm, monotone, unemotional. Quote, "I want to report a double murder. You will find the kids in a brown car, shot with a 9mm Luger." End quote. He claimed responsibility not only for this attack, but for the previous murders on Lake Herman Road 6 months earlier. For the first time, the terror that had struck in silence became public, not just a tragic crime, but a message, a warning. From the killer who didn't just kill, he communicated. Who didn't just vanish, he left evidence of his presence. From that moment on, the world would no longer see him as a lone madman striking randomly in the dark. He became a name, a myth. He became the Zodiac. On that night, July 4, turning into July 5, 1969, the world outside Vallejo's quiet streets changed forever. 2 lives shattered, 1 struggle to survive, a city jolted awake, and a killer who, for the first time, made himself known. Not through footprints, not through fingerprints, through a single phone call, through a name, a symbol, a terror that would echo across decades. The stage was set. The terror had become personal for a generation, and the legend of the Zodiac had begun. Introduction of the Zodiac persona. First letters to newspapers, name, and escalation. After the Blue Rock Springs horror, the world didn't just mourn, it listened. On August 1, 1969, 3 major newspapers in the San Francisco Bay Area, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, received identical letters. In those pages, a new identity was born. He called himself Zodiac. In that letter, the writer claimed responsibility for the 2 recent attacks in Vallejo, the July 4 shooting and the earlier December murders, and threatened more violence if newspapers refused to print his message. He demanded attention. He wanted fame, and he wanted fear. This wasn't just a killer striking in the dark, it was a killer announcing himself. For the first time, the public didn't just hear about victims and shootings, they read direct taunts from a murderer calling himself by a name he chose. And that name was Zodiac. Suddenly, the murders were no longer random crimes. They became part of a chilling narrative, a twisted form of communication between killer and society. Zodiac's letters didn't just confess, they challenged. Publish me or I will kill again. Print these words or more blood will spill. The tone escalated quickly. What had begun as isolated killings transformed into a campaign of terror, wrapped in codes, fear, and publicity. From that moment on, the Bay Area and the nation realized that this was no ordinary serial killer. This was a man who craved the spotlight, who wanted to shape the story, to control the fear. The name Zodiac wasn't just a signature, it was a brand of terror. The birth of a persona continued. Threats, escalation, and a killer entering the spotlight. The first letters were disturbing, but the next wave of letters made something painfully clear. The Zodiac wasn't just killing, he was performing. By late August 1969, the newspapers had finally agreed to publish the killer's coded messages, hoping the public might help crack them. The decision fueled exactly what the Zodiac wanted: eyes, attention, and a captive audience. When the 408 cipher was solved days later by a schoolteacher and his wife, the world expected answers. Instead, they got what the killer wanted most: a platform. His message wasn't an identity, it was a philosophy, a twisted belief that killing was pleasure. And he promised more violence if the newspapers ignored him again. But the real escalation came on August 7th, 1969,
when the San Francisco Examiner received a new letter. This time, the killer wrote 3 chilling words that would change true crime forever. This is the Zodiac speaking. It was the first recorded moment he publicly used the name, a name he created, a name he carved into history. And then the tone darkened even further.
Now that you've watched this far, what's your theory about the Zodiac Killer? Drop your comment in the comment section. I'll be there to read everything. Liking early helps the story travel further. Support your family storyteller by subscribing to this channel.
The school bus threat. In an October 1969 letter, the Zodiac made one of his most infamous threats, a threat that sent waves of fear through the Bay Area. He claimed he would shoot the tires of a school bus, then, quote, pick off the school children as they come bouncing out. Those words shook parents, police, and communities to their core. School buses were followed by patrol cars. Routes were altered. Children were taught what to do if shots were fired. For the first time, Zodiac's violence wasn't confined to lovers' lanes or isolated areas. Now he was targeting the most vulnerable, children. And that was exactly the reaction he wanted.
The demand for publication. With each letter, his demands grew louder, more theatrical, more controlling. If the newspapers did not print his messages on the front page, he warned he would kill again. Editors faced the impossible choice: ignore him and risk lives, or comply and give him the stage he craved. Time and time again, they printed his words, not because they wanted to, but because the alternative felt unthinkable. The Zodiac had discovered his power, not just with a gun, but with a pen. The 408 cipher, the letter that shocked newspapers. On the morning of August 1st, 1969, editors at 3 California newspapers opened envelopes that would ignite one of the largest public decoding efforts in American history. The Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. Each received a letter written in tight, controlled handwriting, the now familiar slanted script that investigators would analyze endlessly for years. Inside each envelope was a message. No return address, no explanation, just a threat and a puzzle.
The triple challenge. Each newspaper received 1/3 of a cryptogram, a coded message made up of strange symbols, circles, triangles, backward letters, and unusual shapes. Together, the pieces formed the now famous 408-character cipher, later nicknamed the Z408. The letters accompanying the cipher were blunt, disturbing, and smug. He demanded the newspapers publish the code on their front pages, or, according to his own words, he would, quote, cruise around all weekend, killing lone people in the night. The killer wasn't asking, he was commanding. And then came the line that electrified the newsroom. This is a cipher containing my identity. For the first time, the public was being invited, taunted, to decode the mind of a murderer.
The weight of the moment. Editors didn't know what to do. If they printed the codes, they feared inciting panic, encouraging the killer, or appearing to negotiate with a murderer. But if they ignored him, more lives could be at risk. Police urged the papers to comply. Investigators admitted they didn't know how real the threat was, and the Zodiac had already proven that he followed through on his promises. So, on August 2nd and 3rd, the newspapers made the decision that would define the case. They printed the cipher. Millions of Californians saw the symbols for the first time, a bizarre field of characters that looked nothing like any code most people had ever encountered. Within hours, phone lines at the newspapers rang non-stop, readers fascinated by puzzles, teachers, cryptography enthusiasts, ordinary citizens. Everyone wanted to crack it. What none of them knew at the time, the answer would not come from a police station, a military code room, or a government agency. It would come from an ordinary couple sitting at their kitchen table.
Donald and Betty Hardin, the unlikely codebreakers. Who were they? According to public records, Donald G. Hardin was a high school history and economics teacher, soft-spoken, methodical, and famously patient, traits that would prove crucial in breaking the cipher. His wife, Betty N. Hardin, was a recreational puzzle enthusiast, described by those who knew her as intelligent, intuitive, and unusually perceptive. She enjoyed crosswords, word puzzles, cryptograms printed in newspapers. She had a mind trained to look for patterns where others saw noise. Together, they weren't detectives. They weren't code professionals. They were just a married couple with curiosity and time. But they would soon become the first people in the world to read the Zodiac's mind.
The night they sat down with the cipher. As soon as the San Francisco Chronicle and other papers published the cipher, the Hardins clipped it out and pinned it to their kitchen table. Donald spread out the sheets, Betty sharpened pencils. They worked quietly, side by side. No fancy tools, no supercomputer, no lab. Just two people, a kitchen table, and a killer's challenge. Betty's first insight, a psychological guess. Public sources widely credit Betty Hardin with the key early intuition that unlocked the entire message. She told her husband that most criminals who brag in letters tend to start their statements in predictable ways. She suspected the Zodiac might begin his message with, I like, I kill. This wasn't random guessing, it was simple psychology. A killer who had taunted journalists, threatened school buses, and demanded front-page publication would almost certainly begin his coded confession with self-focused language. The ego was the center of the Zodiac's world. So Betty told Donald, look for patterns where a phrase like, I like killing, might fit. This moment, this quiet guess, would prove to be one of the most important insights in the entire investigation.
Donald's approach, frequency analysis. Donald, by contrast, used classic frequency analysis, a centuries-old method used to crack substitution ciphers. He studied how often certain symbols repeated, where they appeared in relation to one another, which sequences looked like English letter patterns, which symbols repeated twice, possibly LL, SS, EE, which symbols appeared at the start of lines. He treated the Zodiac cipher like a math problem and a linguistic puzzle at the same time. He counted symbols. He charted patterns. He built substitution guesses. He tested them, erased them, tested again. And slowly, painfully, a few substitutions began to fit. A symbol repeated 5 times in similar grammatical positions. That could be I. Another symbol repeated twice in a row. That could be LL. Another appeared near the beginning of sentences. Possible T. Piece by piece, letter by letter, the killer's encrypted voice began to whisper through the symbols.
The breakthrough. Matching the Zodiac's ego. Once Donald substituted a few letters based on frequency, and Betty made her bold psychological guess, patterns began to reveal themselves like ghosts appearing in fog. They found I. They found kill. They found people. They found because. The cipher began unfolding line by line into something horrifyingly coherent. The Hardins realized, with a mix of dread, awe, and disbelief,
that they were reading the real, unfiltered thoughts of a killer. This was no military code, no mystical symbol language, no expert-level encryption. It was simply a substitution cipher, made complicated only by the Zodiac's unstructured mind. And, once the Hardens broke the pattern, the rest unraveled quickly.
The entire message appears. Eventually, the entire plaintext emerged. A disturbing monologue in which the Zodiac described killing as fun, declared he was collecting slaves for the afterlife, and mocked the police, saying they would never catch him because he was too clever. The message contained no name, despite the Zodiac's earlier promise in the newspapers. This is a cipher containing my identity. That was a lie, or perhaps another cruel joke.
The aftermath. The Hardens contact authorities. When the Hardens realized what they had uncovered, they immediately contacted the Vallejo Police Department. Their solution was quickly verified, then sent nationwide, and became the first major decoding success in the Zodiac case. For the first time, the world had a direct translation of the Zodiac's thoughts, and it came not from experts, not from the government, but from two regular people doing puzzles at home. Their names are forever etched into true crime history: Donald and Betty Harden, the couple who cracked the Zodiac's first code.
The chilling message revealed. The cipher was solved. The mystery, at least a part of it, finally cracked open. And what poured out of those symbols was darker and more disturbing than anyone expected. For days, newspapers across Northern California waited. Police waited. The entire country waited. And when the Harden solution was confirmed and published, the world finally heard the Zodiac speak in a voice he intended the public to hear. Not through rumor, not through police speculation, but through his own uncensored words. The message begins. A killer who enjoyed the act. It didn't start with apology. It didn't start with remorse. It didn't even start with demands. It started with this: I like killing people because it is so much fun. A line now infamous in true crime history, documented on Wikipedia, archived by newspapers, preserved in FBI files. It was the first time the world saw, in plain English, what investigators had only suspected. The Zodiac wasn't killing for revenge, money, or personal conflict. He was killing for pleasure. No complex motive, no tragic backstory, just enjoyment. Something about those words made the cipher more chilling than any murder scene. It revealed who he was inside, and that was far more terrifying. If you watched and enjoyed the story this far, don't let this story fade away like so many unsolved cases. A simple like keeps the victims' names alive. And if you want more deep investigations like this, hit subscribe.
The Zodiac's slave belief, a disturbing worldview. Deep in the message came another revelation, one that has been cited in nearly every public analysis since 1969. The Zodiac claimed he would collect slaves for the afterlife. According to the solved text, when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all the people I have killed will become my slaves. This belief is widely documented on Wikipedia, public archives, and the original published cipher solution. And it changed everything investigators understood about him. This wasn't just a murderer. This was a man operating under a twisted spiritual delusion, or pretending to. A man who believed, or wanted the world to think, that he was harvesting souls. A man whose killings were not acts of violence, but investments for his afterlife. Whether he truly believed it or used it to shock the public, one thing became clear. He wanted the world to know he saw his victims as property.
The ego, a man who needed an audience. There was another theme in the message, one more subtle but just as disturbing. Zodiac didn't just want to kill, he wanted to be recognized for killing. The message bragged about how killing thrilled him, how people were easy targets, how he felt superior to those who lived normal lives. Everything about the cipher screamed ego. Public sources repeatedly emphasized this. He enjoyed the attention. He wanted reporters to print his letters. He wanted the public to panic. He wanted law enforcement to chase him. He turned murder into theater, and he cast himself as the star. The 408 cipher didn't just reveal his thoughts, it revealed his identity as he saw it. A man who believed he was above everyone else. A man who believed the world should listen to him. A man who believed the afterlife would reward him for his crimes.
The final blow, no name. But when people finished reading the decoded message, they felt something unexpected. Disappointment, confusion, frustration. Because in his earlier letter, the Zodiac had promised, "This is a cipher containing my identity." The public took that literally. People expected a real name, a confession, a moment where the killer slipped up. But when the cipher was solved, there was no name, no initials, no hint, not even an alias, nothing. Just a man bragging about murder, about pleasure, and about the afterlife. This omission angered the newspapers, the public, and even the police. They felt played, manipulated, used for the Zodiac's entertainment. It became clear he never intended to give his real name. The promise was a trick to guarantee publication, a way to force the newspapers to obey his demands. The Zodiac hadn't just kept control, he tightened his grip.
The public reaction. Shock, fear, and rage. When the message hit front pages across the country, reactions were explosive. People were horrified by the coldness, by the casual tone, by the way he spoke about killing as if it were a hobby. Parents feared sending their children outside. Couples avoided nighttime drives. Communities began locking their doors for the first time in years. Every word in the cipher made him more infamous. Every sentence fed his ego, and that only pushed him to escalate further. Because one thing was now obvious. The Zodiac loved attention. He craved it. He needed it. And when the Hardens cracked his cipher, when the world read his message, he felt powerful, but also threatened. Because something happened that he didn't anticipate. He was outsmarted. A school teacher and his wife had beaten him at his own game, and killers like the Zodiac don't take humiliation well. But the Zodiac didn't like being outsmarted. And so he did what narcissists do when their pride is wounded. He escalated. He created something far more complex, a cipher he believed no ordinary mind could ever solve. A cipher that would haunt codebreakers for more than 50 years. The 340 cipher. Zodiac sends his hardest puzzle. By late 1969, the Zodiac Killer had already proven that he was more than a murderer. He was a performer, a showman, a man who fed off attention the same way other killers fed off fear. He wrote letters like they were stage scripts. He treated newspapers like his personal billboard. And every time the world reacted, he escalated. So on November 8th, 1969, he unleashed something that would haunt cryptographers, FBI analysts, journalists, amateur code breakers, and the entire true crime world for over 50 years. A new cipher, a new challenge, A coded message so twisted, so intentionally disorderly, so mathematically chaotic, that for decades experts quietly wondered if it was solvable at all. This cipher would later be known publicly as the Z340, a grid of 340 symbols arranged in 20 rows and 17 columns, each symbol written by the killer in his unmistakable, uneven hand. And unlike the earlier 408-character cipher, which was cracked by school teachers within 1 week, the Z340 became one of the most infamous unsolved puzzles in American criminal history.
The letter arrives. On that November morning, the San Francisco Chronicle received yet another envelope from the Zodiac. Inside, it was a greeting card with a dripping blood design, confirmed through public FBI scans and historical archives. A handwritten message, a cipher sheet tightly packed with geometric symbols, shapes, and unfamiliar characters. Nothing like the earlier 408. This one looked hostile, chaotic, almost nonsensical. And yet the killer claimed it contained a message he fully expected the world to fail to uncover. The complexity of the Z340. In the days after the Chronicle published the cipher, cryptographers began analyzing it. Experts from the FBI, naval cryptanalysts, mathematics professors, civilian codebreakers, and thousands of ordinary people who had clipped the cipher from the newspaper. But very quickly, something became clear. This cipher was on a different level. Why experts considered it nearly uncrackable? Public sources consistently describe several major obstacles. Number 1, a break from the 408 cipher pattern. The Zodiac's previous cipher, the 408, was built using simple monoalphabetic substitution, repeated words, standard left-to-right reading, and predictable English phrasing. This made it solvable using frequency analysis. But the 340? It didn't follow those rules. Not even close. The usual frequency patterns were scrambled beyond recognition. The English letter E, the most common letter, did not appear anywhere near its typical frequency. Nothing lined up. Number 2, possible transposition, rearranging the order of reading. Cryptographers began suspecting that the Zodiac didn't intend for the cipher to be read straight across. There were signs of characters being rearranged, words possibly hidden diagonally rather than horizontally, vertical and diagonal reading routes, blocks of text intentionally scrambled. This is supported by public research from David Orenchak and others, who later helped crack the cipher. The Zodiac had essentially broken the reading order, transforming the cipher into a maze rather than a sentence. Number 3, symbol manipulation and noise. The 340 contained more unique symbols than the 408. This alone made it harder. In addition, some symbols seemed deliberately designed to distract solvers. Mirrored characters, shapes slightly modified from earlier versions, symbols repeated at irregular intervals, deliberate noise inserted to confuse patterns. Experts debated for years whether some symbols were meaningless, intentionally inserted to mislead. The FBI publicly stated the cipher lacked solvable patterns for decades. Number 4, no easy hooks to grab onto. In most ciphers, you look for repeated pairs, 4-letter words, repeated phrases, double letters, expected common words like kill, the, me, I. But the Zodiac rewired his entire language structure in the Z340. He removed the obvious entry points. What remained was a message that looked like a wall of random characters. The growing doubt. Was the cipher even real?
Throughout the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s, many analysts began to suspect a painful possibility. What if the Z340 contained no real message at all? What if it was designed purely to humiliate experts and keep the Zodiac in the spotlight? This theory spread widely across public forums, newspaper archives, and scholarly discussions. Some believed the cipher was mathematically meaningless. The killer used a pseudo-cipher pattern. The entire grid was one giant taunt. The Zodiac had no linguistic structure in mind. Others believed the message was real, but the method was unknown. Whatever the truth was, no one could prove it. The cipher became a ghost, a puzzle that mocked every attempt to decode it.
A new level of frustration. Even elite cryptographers struggled. The FBI's Cryptanalysis and Racketeering Records Unit, CRRU, spent months with no success. Amateur groups spent decades analyzing symbol patterns, rotation schemes, row permutations, and every known cipher technique. Nothing worked. Nothing matched the 408. Nothing matched any known cipher family. The Zodiac had, for the first time, managed to create something that fought back. And the fact that he sent it so soon after being outsmarted on the 408 only made the psychological meaning clearer. This time, he wanted to win. He wanted dominance, superiority, control. And above all, he wanted to prove the world could not decode him. Not his symbols, not his words, not his identity, not his mind.
The FBI steps in. At the time, the FBI had one of the most advanced cryptanalysis units in the world. These were professionals who worked on Cold War intelligence, Soviet codes, military intercepts, and encryption systems far more complex than anything a civilian would typically produce. Yet, as the cipher began circulating through Washington, D.C., it quickly became clear that something was different about this one. FBI analysts tried everything. Frequency analysis, the basic approach that solved the 408, fell apart immediately. Some symbols appeared often, but not in the right ratios. Some barely appeared at all, and certain symbols were repeated in strange clusters, almost like the Zodiac was deliberately sabotaging traditional decoding methods. Pattern recognition. Experts searched for repeated sequences, possible word stems, double letters, signature phrases, and structural symmetry, but the cipher refused to behave like normal language. Assumption testing. Cryptographers tested for simple substitution, homophonic substitution, transposition, polyalphabetic systems. Yet none of these hypotheses produced even a fragment of readable text. The FBI eventually logged the cipher as unresolved, noting in internal documents that the code was not consistent with any standard encryption system. To them, it was almost as if the Zodiac had taken a normal cipher and then broken it on purpose. Amateur codebreakers join the hunt. With the hardened success fresh in the public memory, thousands of amateur puzzle solvers tried their hands at the Z340. Newspapers printed the cipher. Readers tore it out to take home. Cryptography clubs, math students, hobbyists, and conspiracy theorists all tried to claim the prize. But the cipher became an obsession with no reward. People looked for hidden diagonals. Nothing. People tried reading it backwards. Still nothing. Some tried layering grids or shifting rows alphabetically. Only gibberish. As the weeks turned into months and months into years, the amateur scene grew frustrated. On early internet forums decades later, Usenet threads, early cryptology message boards, and eventually Reddit, many users described the cipher as a perfectly crafted trap, meant to waste time, unbreakable unless the Zodiac wanted it solved. His first cipher had been logical. This one seemed designed to humiliate. No patterns, no meaning, no progress. By 1970, most codebreakers shared the same conclusion.
The Z340 contained no clear repeating words, no obvious alignment, and no sensible grouping of symbols. Crucially, analysts realized something that made the puzzle nearly impossible at the time. The Zodiac mixed substitution with transposition, meaning the message wasn't just encoded, it was scrambled. And without knowing how it was scrambled, every potential solution created thousands of dead ends. Some experts believed the cipher might not contain any message at all, that it could be a joke, an empty taunt. But others insisted that the Zodiac was too arrogant, too theatrical, and too obsessed with being understood to leave a cipher meaningless. And so the mystery hardened. The Z340 became a monument to frustration. Cryptographers called it the Mount Everest of unsolved ciphers. For decades, it stood untouched, no closer to being solved than the day it arrived. A cipher that mocked the experts. By late 1969 and early 1970, the Z340 cipher had become a national frustration. Everyone who mattered had taken a swing at it. Professional cryptanalysts, military code breakers, mathematicians, puzzle enthusiasts, but not a single person could pry even one sentence out of the Zodiac's chaotic grid of symbols. And that's exactly what made the cipher feel like an insult. It didn't just sit there quietly, it mocked them. It mocked law enforcement. It mocked the newspapers. It mocked the public who had grown desperate for answers. And above all, it mocked the cryptographers who prided themselves on being able to break anything with enough time and enough logic. Because the cipher didn't obey logic. It played with it. The Zodiac's public taunts continued. While experts were tearing their hair out over the incomprehensible 340-symbol block, the Zodiac continued sending letters that did make sense, letters that confirmed he was watching. And he seemed to enjoy every moment of the confusion he was causing. In subsequent correspondences, as documented publicly through archived police reports and newspaper reproductions, Zodiac sprinkled additional hints, insults, and even more threats. But none of these messages contained the key to the Z340. Instead, they acted like verbal jabs, like he was reminding everyone, "I already beat you once, and I'll beat you again." His tone grew more confident, more condescending, more theatrical. The persona was evolving, and the cipher was the centerpiece of that performance. Experts realize they're being played. What became clear to many analysts, even those within the FBI and cryptographic circles, was that the Zodiac wasn't just trying to hide a message, he was trying to embarrass them. Everything about the Z340 violated the norms of classical ciphers. 1. No clean symmetry. Unlike the Z408, which had recognizable pattern structure, the Z340 looked chaotic when viewed as a block. 2. Strange symbol placement. Clusters of repeated symbols were placed in unnatural positions. 3. Potential deliberate noise. Some analysts theorize that the Zodiac inserted meaningless characters as a way to block pattern recognition, something publicly discussed in early cipher analysis communities. 4. Constant shifting of logic. The cipher didn't stay in a single style. It behaved like substitution, then transposition, then something else entirely. This was extremely unusual for a single puzzle. As some experts put it decades later on public forums, it was like trying to solve a puzzle that changes shape every time you touch it. Growing public anxiety. While the cipher resisted every attempt to decode it, one thing became clear. The public was terrified. Newspapers reported on the failed attempts. People wrote letters asking if the message contained names. Parents worried about the school bus threats the Zodiac had written about in earlier letters. A cipher sitting unsolved felt dangerous. People believed that if the message was decoded, it might reveal another target, a date, a plan, or a confession. The idea that the message remained locked away felt like the killer was still in control. A new fear emerges. What if the cipher contained a confession? Authorities wondered, even debated internally, whether cracking the cipher might finally expose the killer's identity, his motive, or a clue to his next location. This idea was so strong that, according to publicly accessible FBI records, the Bureau continued to return to the Z340 over the decades, hoping that new techniques or new pattern recognition tools might finally reveal its secrets. But every attempt ended the same way. Silence. Just silence and symbols. It was as if the Zodiac had locked his message in a vault only he could open. The cipher becomes a legend. By the mid-1970s, the failure to crack the Z340 had become part of Zodiac mythology. It was no longer just a clue, it was a symbol of the killer's power. Amateur cryptographers continued trying. The FBI revisited it periodically. Newspapers republished it around anniversaries. Books analyzed it, forums debated it endlessly, and the cipher remained untouched. A perfect mystery, a perfect taunt, a perfect way for the Zodiac to maintain his presence long after the killing stopped. The Z340 wasn't just a puzzle. It was a message. You can't catch me. You can't even understand me. And for over 50 years, he was right. The cipher that refused to break. When experts failed to crack Z340 in the early 1970s, the puzzle didn't fade away. Instead, it grew. Every time a book mentioned the case, every time a new documentary aired, every time someone online whispered, "What if we figured it out?" the cipher resurfaced, gaining fresh attention and attracting new minds. By the 1990s, with the birth of the internet, that attention exploded. Suddenly, hobby cryptographers, puzzle enthusiasts, mathematicians, programmers, and college students had a digital space to gather. The earliest message boards, Usenet threads, and true crime communities, and they all shared the same obsession. Can we solve the Zodiac's impossible cipher? Online communities take over. Public forums, years before Reddit existed, became the meeting place for anyone chasing the mystery. People posted hand-drawn grids, transcripts, symbol analysis charts, attempts at frequency counts, newly invented decryption techniques. The Z340 became a ritual for some, an initiation test. If you were serious about the Zodiac case, you tried the cipher. Even if you failed, the attempt itself became part of the culture. Later, when Reddit emerged, entire communities, especially subreddits dedicated to cryptography, puzzles, and true crime, picked up the torch. Every few months, someone would post, "I think I cracked the Zodiac cipher," and people would rush to check the work. Every single time, the attempt fell apart under scrutiny. But no matter how often people failed, more attempts followed. Because the obsession didn't weaken, it strengthened. College professors bring the cipher into the classroom. As the years passed, Z340 moved from internet forums to the academic world. Cryptography professors at various universities, especially those teaching classical ciphers and pattern recognition, began using the Zodiac cipher as a case study. Some used it as final exam questions, programming assignments, machine learning experiments, or even extra credit challenges. Students who had never heard of the Zodiac Killer walked into class and found themselves face to face with one of history's most infamous puzzles. For them, this wasn't a serial killer case. This was an intellectual Everest. Even computer science departments used the cipher to demonstrate brute force limitations, combinatorial explosion, and the flaws in classical decryption software. And still, no one got closer to a solution. The cipher earns a nickname, the serial killer Rubik's Cube. By the early 2000s, newspapers, blogs, documentaries, and Reddit threads began to refer to the Z340 as something else entirely, the serial killer Rubik's Cube. It was a perfect comparison. It looked simple, it had clear geometric structure, and yet solving it felt impossible unless you understood the exact pattern of twists the original creator used. Just like a Rubik's Cube, randomness didn't help, guesswork didn't help, luck didn't help. You needed to understand the mind behind it. The Zodiac knew this, and he enjoyed it. A puzzle that spanned generations. What makes the Z340 unique is not just its complexity, but its endurance. 3 generations tried to solve it. People who lived through the murders in the 1960s, millennials who grew up with internet cold case culture, and younger puzzle enthusiasts who discovered the cipher on YouTube, Reddit, and Wikipedia. Some spent months on it, some spent years, some spent decades. Many described it publicly as a lifelong project, a mental itch, a battle they refused to lose. The cipher became a hobby for some, an obsession for many, and an identity for a few. There were cryptographers who admitted online, "I know I'll never crack it, but I can't stop trying." For 51 years, Z340 resisted everything. Every algorithm, every statistical model, every linguistic theory, every amateur attempt, every professional effort. It became a legend, a monument to frustration, a puzzle that laughed back. And then, after half a century of failure, everything changed. A breakthrough was coming, one the Zodiac never expected. And it wouldn't come from the government or the FBI or the world's top cryptographers. It would come from 3 men working from their homes, using tools the Zodiac could never have imagined. The 2020 breakthrough. For more than half a century, the Zodiac's 340-character cipher taunted the world. Experts failed, machines failed, government agencies failed. But in December 2020, something extraordinary happened. 3 ordinary men, working from 3 different countries, succeeded where everyone else had failed. Their names would become permanently tied to Zodiac history. David Oranjak, an American code-breaking enthusiast and software developer. Jarl van Eyck, a Belgian warehouse worker and brilliant software engineer on the side. Sam Blake, an Australian mathematician and applied statistics researcher. None of them were detectives, none worked for the FBI, none were cryptographic legends in academia. They were simply people who refused to give up. And their obsession changed everything. The team that shouldn't have existed. David Oranjak had already spent 15 years studying Z340. He ran YouTube explanations, attended cryptography conferences, and created visualization programs to analyze the cipher's structure. Most people would have given up after a few months. He didn't. Sam Blake was a mathematician from Melbourne, skilled in algorithmic pattern recognition. He discovered Oranjak's work online and started experimenting with mathematical models of the cipher. And then there was Jarl van Eyck, a quiet Belgian genius who had created some of the most advanced cipher-solving software available to the public, AZ Decrypt. His program could test millions of possible transpositions and substitution combinations. The FBI later publicly acknowledged it was instrumental in cracking the cipher. These 3 men lived across 3 different continents. They never met in person. Their collaboration began with curiosity and ended with history. The software that finally cracked it. The breakthrough came from a strategy no one had seriously used before.
While older attempts focused on straightforward reading, left to right, top to bottom, Uranchak and his team suspected that the Zodiac used a complex transposition system. This meant the message wasn't written in the order it appeared. Characters might follow diagonal routes. Lines could be offset or zigzagged. Portions of the message might be shuffled. The cipher could be read in unexpected directions. This made traditional decoding nearly impossible. But Van Eyck's software could simulate these patterns and test them at massive scale. They fed the cipher into AZ Decrypt and programmed the algorithms to search for meaningful English fragments. Hours went by, then days, then cycles of hundreds of thousands of tests. Finally, a pattern emerged. A diagonal structure, a repeating phrase, a crack in the wall. The moment English appeared. One weekend in December 2020, the software produced something that made all three men stop cold. A phrase that resembled meaningful English. Hope you are. That was all they needed. It confirmed they had found the correct decryption pathway. Then more text unfolded. Trying to catch me. Not me on the TV show. I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise sooner. The message was crude, emotionally flat yet chilling, written in the Zodiac's familiar voice. The cipher was solved. After 51 years, the Z340 finally spoke. The full meaning of the message. According to the FBI and publicly released reports, here is the summarized content of the decrypted message. The Zodiac mocked a recent televised interview where a caller falsely claimed to be him. He boasted about enjoying killing, consistent with the tone of the 408 cipher. He repeated his belief that killing would grant him slaves in the afterlife. He stated he wasn't afraid of execution because it would send him to paradise sooner. But most important, he did not reveal his name. Not a hint, not an initial, not a clue. Just like the first cipher, the Zodiac had lied again when he promised that his identity was hidden inside the code. The disappointment was global, but the psychological insight was priceless. Understanding the mind behind the message. Public criminology sources, FBI behavioral analyses, and academic commentary all agree on several traits revealed by the Z340 decoding. 1. Narcissism. The Zodiac liked attention. Even 50 years later, his surviving messages revolve around me, my TV appearance, my fans, my afterlife reward. It's self-centered, theatrical, and dripping with ego. 2. Sadism. He doesn't describe violence with remorse. He describes it as gratification. The message makes clear that the suffering of others is his pleasure. 3. Chaos as communication. He wasn't trying to be solved. He was trying to frustrate, confuse, and control the narrative. His ciphers were less about meaning and more about power. 4. A refusal to give closure. 2 ciphers, 0 identity. The Zodiac always promised the one thing he knew he would never deliver. And that is why, decades after his last confirmed communication, we still talk about him. He kept the world chasing shadows. Most viewers won't comment. They'll just move on. But if you're someone who actually appreciates deep research and real storytelling, prove it by liking the video, drop a comment, and hitting the subscribe button. Suspects, hoaxes, and the unsolved mystery. The major suspects. For more than 5 decades, investigators, both official and amateur, have tried to answer one question. Who was the Zodiac Killer? Names have surfaced. Some have become legends. Others have been debunked. And many remain in the gray zone. Possible, but unproven. Disclaimer.
This video uses AI-generated images and visual representations. Real images of victims or suspects are not used in order to respect privacy, protect individuals, and avoid sensitive tragedy content. This content is presented for educational and informational purposes only. These are the most publicly discussed suspects, each with their evidence for, evidence against, and credibility analysis. 1. Arthur Lee Allen, the most famous, most discussed Zodiac suspect. Arthur Lee Allen is easily the best-known Zodiac suspect, popularized by the 2007 film Zodiac, countless documentaries, books, and interviews. He was the only person ever served with a search warrant specifically for the Zodiac case. Green, evidence for Allen. 1. Multiple people reported his strange comments. According to public sources, Allen allegedly told a friend that he wanted to kill people and called the idea of hunting humans the most dangerous game. 2. He owned a Zodiac brand wristwatch. He wore a watch with the exact symbol the killer used on his letters. This is often mentioned in documentaries because of the eerie coincidence. 3. He lived near or had connections to several crime locations. Allen lived in Vallejo, close to where the Zodiac attacked Darlene Ferrin and Mike Majau. 4. Handwriting expert thought his handwriting was similar. Some armchair analysts pointed out visual similarities, though not enough for official confirmation. Red, evidence against Allen. 1. His DNA did not match. A DNA sample from Allen did not match the partial DNA profile recovered from Zodiac letters, not 100% definitive, but widely publicized. 2. Fingerprints didn't match. Latent fingerprints lifted from the crime scenes did not match Allen's. 3. Handwriting experts rejected Allen. Several professional analysts concluded that Allen's handwriting did not match the Zodiac letters. 4. His alibi for one attack. Allen said he was at a family gathering during one of the Zodiac attacks. This doesn't clear him entirely, but it weakened the theory. Credibility analysis. Arthur Lee Allen remains a strong cultural suspect, but among actual investigators and experts, the consensus leans towards he was suspicious but likely not the Zodiac. He fits some circumstantial clues, but he fails several major forensic comparisons. Richard Gaikowski, the mysterious journalist and political activist. Richard Gaikowski was a journalist at the Good Times newspaper in San Francisco, a publication known for controversial anti-war content and political activism. Evidence for Gaikowski. Voice similarity. In the early 2000s, a man claiming to be a former acquaintance believed Gaikowski's voice matched the Zodiac's from the famous 1969 police call. This claim became popular online. Lived in the Bay Area during the murders. He lived and worked near areas connected to Zodiac communications. Some physical similarities. Witness sketches loosely resemble him, though this is highly subjective. Evidence against Gaikowski. No confirmed forensic link. No fingerprints, no DNA, no handwriting match. No official agency ever named him a serious suspect. The FBI and SFPD have never placed him on an official suspect list. Claims mostly originated from one individual online, weakening the reliability. Credibility analysis. Gaikowski makes for an intriguing online theory, but no verifiable evidence connects him to the Zodiac case. He remains a fringe suspect in the wider conversation.
Lawrence Kane, the man many believe fits the profile. Lawrence Kane, sometimes spelled K in reports, appears frequently in documentaries because of several coincidental connections. Evidence for Kane. Number 1. Eyewitness reports. Some claims say that a witness from the Paul Stein murder looked at Kane's photo and saw similarities. This has been reused heavily in documentaries. Number 2. Lived near several victims. He lived in the Bay Area, near multiple Zodiac crime scenes. Number 3. Behavioral and psychological profile. Kane had a history of neurological issues from a car accident, allegedly affecting impulse control, leading some amateur profilers to view him as a match for Zodiac's erratic behavior. Evidence against Kane. Number 1. No forensic evidence. No DNA match. No fingerprint match. No handwriting match. Number 2. Most claims come from amateur investigators. Nothing tying him to the case comes from official law enforcement documentation. Number 3. Eyewitness claims are unreliable. Zodiac descriptions are inconsistent, and eyewitness reliability is low. Credibility analysis. Kane remains one of the more popular internet suspects, but from an evidence standpoint, he is no closer than dozens of other men considered over the years.
Earl Van Best Jr., the most viral internet theory. This theory became widespread after a 2014 book, The Most Dangerous Animal of All, claimed Earl Van Best Jr. was the Zodiac. The author was Van Best's biological son. Evidence for Van Best Jr. 1. Physical resemblance. Some believe he looks like the Zodiac sketch. 2. Newspaper connections. He was featured in a newspaper marriage story. Someone online believed this typography matched Zodiac's letters, though this is not proven. 3. The son's claims. His biological son's book made the theory famous. Evidence against Van Best Jr. 1. Handwriting does not match. Professional document examiners publicly stated that Van Best's handwriting did not match the Zodiac's. 2. Law enforcement does not consider him a suspect. SFPD and the FBI have never listed him as a suspect. 3. Claims were largely emotional. The theory heavily relied on personal interpretation rather than evidence. Credibility analysis. The Earl Van Best Jr. theory went viral online, but experts overwhelmingly reject it. It remains unproven and widely criticized.
Gary Francis Post, Casebreakers Theory, the most recent media sensation. In 2021, a volunteer investigative group calling itself the Casebreakers announced they believed the Zodiac was a man named Gary Francis Post who died in 2018. The story went international within hours. Evidence for Post, according to Casebreakers. 1. Alleged photos they claim match Zodiac sketches. The group said old photos of Post resemble the Zodiac composite sketch. 2. Cryptic claims about removing letters in Zodiac ciphers. They suggested that removing letters matching Post's name revealed Zodiac-related messages. This is not confirmed by any cryptographic expert. 3. Post's alleged militaristic background. He had experience with weapons and lived in California. Evidence against Post. 1. FBI publicly disputed the claim. The FBI explicitly stated the Zodiac case remains open and no new suspect had been confirmed. 2. No forensic evidence. No DNA match. No fingerprint match. No handwriting match. 3. Mainstream experts rejected the cipher interpretation. Actual cipher specialists, including David Aronchak, said the letter removal technique was not credible. 4. Local police did not accept the theory. Riverside Police Department stated the claim had no evidence. Credibility analysis. The Gary Post theory captured media attention because it was new and dramatic. However, no official agency has accepted it, no forensic evidence supports it, and most experts consider it unproven and weak.
Final summary of the suspect list. Most popular, public, Arthur Lee Allen. Most internet-driven, Richard Gaikowski, Lawrence Kane, Earl Van Best Jr. Most recent viral claim, Gary Francis Post. Official position, FBI plus police. None of these suspects have been confirmed. The Zodiac's identity remains unknown. Conclusion: a perfect storm of obstacles. The mystery of the Zodiac Killer persists not for lack of interest, but because of a perfect storm. 1. Limited forensic tools at the time of crimes. 2. No conclusive fingerprints, DNA, or physical evidence. 3. Contradictory or weak non-physical evidence, handwriting, eyewitness. 4. Long passage of time eroding or destroying any weak clues. 5. The killer's own cunning, disguises, method changes, silence. 6. The high burden of proof required for conviction. After more than 50 years, the result is tragic, but simple. We have a killer's words. We have his confessions, but we don't have the proof. And without proof, there can be no charge, no conviction, no closure. The Zodiac Killer was never officially identified, and even today, the case remains open, waiting for answers that may never come. If you appreciate deep research and real storytelling like this, support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. It helps more than you think. And if you have your own theory about the case, drop it in the comments. The truth, after all, is still out there.